to the Redskin. Go, Redskin.
Good people, and welcome back to another episode of Rated Redskins Radio, where this week we're going to talk about several topics, some things to do with the stadium, some things to do with the football team. Without further ado, let's just go on and get into it. This past weekend, I actually was subject to watch some secondary football action, and to be quite honest with you, I was pleasantly surprised. The AAF, or the Alliance of American Football, was actually a smashing success in my opinion. And two former Redskin players actually stood out the most for me, as a matter of fact. Terrence Garvin for Orlando had 2 interceptions, one of which he ran back for a pick 6. And Rashard Ross from Arizona, I believe it's the, was it the Hot Shots? 5 catches, 103 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, Ross actually, I believe, had some decent punt returns and kick returns. He's got some good speed. But Garvin was never really able to crack the anything but the special teams for us. But he looked really good against the team that I essentially was pulling for, which is the Atlanta Legends. And to be quite honest with you, after taking a long look at what these uniforms look like, this Memphis uniform goes hard in the paint. I mean, look at that uniform. That looks nice. I like that helmet too. I don't know, I mean, do I essentially have to pick a team with this league? I mean, I don't know. I was saying I was going to pull for Atlanta, which I'm going to go ahead and stick with that just because they're the closest, I guess. But, you know, unless Washington or Virginia puts a team out, then I don't really essentially see me being tied, quote-unquote, regionally to anything. But I am going to continue to root for Atlanta for now. I'm going to be honest with you, man. Last weekend, they got their asses kicked by Steve Spurrier. That Orlando team Spurrier's got, they just put it on Atlanta. I don't even think Atlanta scored until like the 3rd quarter or something like that. And it's really hard for me to cheer for a team with anybody but the name Sims on the back of their jersey as the quarterback. It's hard for me. So, you know, I know Atlanta's coach has never coached at any level. He's never been the head coach at any level. So I guess we're going to see what kind of coach he actually is, because I do not believe that Aaron Murray should be sitting behind Matt Sims on any roster at any point in time. I mean, Matt Sims literally looks like he stands in concrete for a living. I mean, it's just the way it looks. There's a reason why he never made the league, and I get that this is a secondary developmental league, but sometimes the developmental stages in life move on from certain aspects of players. Like Matt Sims, there's no tomorrow for him. Let Aaron Murray play. But anyway, the league itself looked pretty good. I have to admit that I don't know about anybody else, but I'll be tuning back in this weekend. I believe tonight and then tomorrow night for more games. There might actually be a game on Monday night. I'm not certain, but we'll see how week 2 goes, because I know that the XFL was a massive fall off from their like week 1 to like week 3. So we'll see how that works out. You know, I myself have always thought that a secondary league or a developmental league would be a good means to being able to fill the NFL perhaps with talent on the special teams and other aspects of the football games. I mean, when a lot of these players get hurt come week 13 and you start to see an injured reserve list just filling all the way up to the top, you know, that start digging for other players to come in and play. Now, if there's a secondary league where some of these players can be, you know, seasoned and actually have a chance to be able to put the cleats on and move around and do stuff on the football field, then when the football season gets there, they have more of a crop they can pluck from. Now, obviously, some of these guys are still never going to make it. But if a league like this is allowed to continue, then these players can come in and maybe even make a secondary involvement to their career, maybe get a little juice at the end of a career to maybe make a push back to the league. Maybe in the end they're nothing but a special teams player. It'll be interesting which direction it goes in. I know next year Vince McMahon is rebooting, or whatever you want to call it, the XFL. I am not certain where his crop of players are going to come from if the AAF is in existence and already a year ahead of him. I know that they're trying to be the anti-NFL, though, which leads me to believe they're probably going to make some mistakes along the way, and Vince is probably going to try to make it some sort of them versus the NFL kind of thing, which is the dumbest thing anybody could do in this situation, bar none. The worst thing they could do is try to take on the NFL because they're going to lose. I mean, it's the Shield, man. You don't take on the Shield and make it. The USFL is a good enough example for anybody. If you really want to learn the lesson yourself, or if you're too young to know the story, just look up the 30 for 30 with the USFL. There's a lot in there to do with Donald Trump, the USFL, and the NFL as a whole. And it's a good reason why Donald Trump is not a big fan of the NFL. But anyway, moving on from that subject, the league looks like it's a week one success. Now, I'm not certain how many weeks that they do have on this, but we'll see how it goes moving forward. The next thing I want to touch on is a story that broke this week, or I won't say broke this week, that came out this week, kind of pointing direction of the Maryland governor saying that he's not going to continue on with negotiations with the Redskins over the new area or the new grounds for a new stadium for Washington. Now, first you need to understand that at this point in time, lawmakers are all scurrying to try to come together to block any sort of money package to any NFL owner or anything at this point. So making it kind of impossible for owners like Daniel Snyder to get any public funding to build a new stadium. And to be quite honest with you, I don't blame them. And I always knew that if the Redskins were going to get the opportunity to be able to build in D.C. again, it was all going to have to come out of pocket for Daniel Snyder. And I'm pretty certain that most Redskin fans, even the biggest Danny haters, already knew or already know that Daniel Snyder's got enough money to be able to build his own stadium. What they're trying to do is get the rights to be able to build in D.C. Now, if they can get some public funding, of course they're going to take it. I mean, you're dealing with billionaires here. They're always looking for a way to cut costs. That's how these guys do business, man. It's a lot of politics involved. That is the reason why Bruce Allen is still employed by the Washington Redskins. He's a politician, a politician's brother, the ex-coach's son. Onward and onward and onward. I could give you 5 or 6 more reasons why this guy is a political figure. He's here to talk politics. That's why whenever he's brought in to talk to the media, he never gives full answers. I don't doubt that he's a fan of the team or that he doesn't love the Washington Redskins. What I doubt is that what he's telling us is the God honest truth, or whatever you believe in is truth. I mean, it's hard to get this guy in a room trapped into a corner and get him to give you a straight answer. Case in point, this week he was basically caught in the hallway on Capitol Hill and questioned by TMZ about a few different topics. I'll get to that in a second. But you could tell that he was there doing something political. Now, let's look more into this. Governor Larry Hogan talking about he's not going to help the Redskins get any land deal. You know, the deal that has been floating around is he was going to trade land between the area near MGM. It's like a 300-acre piece of federal land there. He was going to get access to that and then trade it to Snyder for the area where FedEx is at. And it was going to be a land swap. Now, that hasn't materialized, but at the same time, what has happened is what I was just talking a second ago about how lawmakers are now all banding together and trying to block any kind of NFL owner from getting public funding, especially Daniel Snyder, though. So essentially what they've done is they've tried to suck all of the energy out of Snyder's chance of getting a stadium financed or even built at this point. But then they backtrack a little bit as far as the DC Council goes, because the council actually wants to put somebody in to the area where RFK was at. They want to put somebody in that area. Right now, that's just a dormant spot. You know, that stadium's falling down. They want somebody to come in and build there, make it vibrant again. Now, you got certain members of the city council that are always going to be against it because they say the name is disparaging, or because they believe that the neighborhood next to it's going to be negatively impacted, the noise. I mean, I can sit here and go blase all day long about certain individuals having issues. It's always something with the DC Council. I mean, for a while they were saying they all had a problem with the name and they didn't want the team there at all. They've since kind of backtracked on that a little bit, and essentially the thought is that Snyder is kind of in cahoots with Donald Trump to the point of where he's gave some kickback money along the way. And now when this new spending bill goes through, they're going to try to put in something in there that gives a provision to the land usage of RFK and making it to where the Redskins can perhaps get back in there. Okay. Now that's the short and curlies of the situation. Now Maryland had the Oxen Cove Park is what the area is. It was next to a wastewater facility or something to that nature, which always made me kind of cock my eyebrow a little bit, like, wait a minute now, it's next to a shit plant? Hold up. So we just go watch a game and had to smell, feces cooking over there? I mean, I've been next to shit plants before, and it's not a very good smell. So it's something that kind of caught my eye, made me think twice. But any rate, I don't hold what Larry Hogan is saying with any weight, because he's playing politics right now. He wants to get reelected. The Redskins, their lease doesn't run out till 2027. But you have to understand something, like, these lawmakers seem to be missing the underlying effects here. And I know the fans are missing it. But Daniel Snyder owns the property, okay? Now, I saw somebody in the Washington Post the other day wrote an article, and definitely she didn't, miss the fact that Daniel Snyder owns his own land, okay? Everybody else misses this fact. Everybody else is like, well, what happens in 2027 if they don't find a place to build the stadium? Well, I'll tell you what happens, folks. He owns his own property. It's FedEx back there behind him. All that land is his. All that land is his. If he chooses, he can build another stadium right there and tear the old one down. That's his decision to make. Now, I don't think that he wants to be in that spot anymore. He wants to be in a more accessible area. Let's just be honest. RFK is the spot that everybody wants. The fans want it. It's easier for everybody to access. It's easier for public transportation. Everybody in the city be able to come to the games again. It just fits everything that everybody already needs and wants. So it's kind of understandable to see why Snyder would want to move. But at the same time, if they try to pressure him, he could just build a new stadium or try to rebuild FedEx. And everybody always says, well, what about his? I've had people question, throw the question back to me. Well, what about the lease he has? Ain't that with the state? Folks, the lease is with FedEx. They sold the naming rights to FedEx. I'm pretty certain that there's a clause in the naming rights that there's a clause in the contract that states if attendance drops below a certain amount per year, that they can void the contract anyway. But nobody's really talking about that either. That was something that was discussed 2 or 3 years ago, before all of these attendance drops started happening. So at this point, it's a very good chance that they could perhaps find a loophole somewhere if they were to find a better area to build a stadium in. A lot of people always say, well, it took Jack Kent Cooke forever to get a stadium, and he ended up having to move from where he originally was at, which was true because he had one place picked out, and then the deal fell through, and they had to move to where they're at now. He even named the area at that time from the name combination of both of his sons' names, or grandsons' names, excuse me. But what Jack Kent Cooke didn't really understand was when he built the stadium, he built it so fast that they didn't even realize what they were doing. The stadium ended up being an old design. Essentially, they built a brand new stadium that was 10 years old already. They didn't do anything innovative. They didn't do anything to try to make it stand out. They didn't do anything to make it, singular instead of just like everything else. Now, if you look at the other stadiums that were built at the same time that one was built, I think Jacksonville built one at the same time. There's a couple other stadiums I can't think of off the top of my head. But if you look at the other stadiums that were built at the same time, they were all built in the same design. They all went up quick. I think it was like 17 months to build FedEx or something of that nature. It was like the fastest amount of time at that point in building a new stadium. And it was a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of mistakes made. And, there was a lot more issues there as far as finding a spot, and because of the name, that what the media really said to everybody, and that's why they ended up in Maryland, was because Maryland took them with open arms. And what Snyder essentially thought was going to happen with this whole ordeal is he thought that he'd have a bidding war with Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. He thought he'd be able to sit in the middle and be able to rake in the dollars and not be able to spend that much of his money to build a new stadium, eventually get in where he wanted. Where he wants to be is D.C. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He wants to be back in D.C. If he wanted to stay in Maryland, he would just rebuild FedEx. That's, as truthful as it gets. If he wanted to stay in Maryland, that's what he would do. He wants to get back out of Maryland. Maryland is now owned by the Ravens. Essentially the people that love the Redskins live in the Virginia, D.C. area. Maryland has been taken over. I realize there's still some remnant fans in the Maryland area, leftover hangovers. Something that I've learned throughout the years now is that the fan base is actually scattered everywhere, all across the country otherwise. And what I tend to find out is it's because people's parents were in the military or in the Navy, or, there in D.C. and then got shipped elsewhere, and in the process became Redskin fans in other, areas, and then maybe they passed it on to their kids and so on and so forth. And you end up with Redskin fans in Minnesota and Redskin fans in North Dakota and, California. Of course, there's a whole bunch of Redskin fans in Arizona. There's a couple of guys here on YouTube that can attest to that. It's almost like a second home game when we go out and play the Cardinals, and same thing in North Carolina. When we go play the Carolina Panthers, I've yet to see a game where Carolina outnumbers us in their home stadium. I've yet to see that. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, they're going to get a new stadium no matter what. It's just a matter of logistics at this point. And I honestly believe that the best chance for them to get back in D.C. is now, with Donald Trump in office, somebody that will approve it and push it through. Call it what you want. I know there's people that are against the Redskins name or against the Redskins period, or maybe even against football, that have already pointed out that, you know, Daniel Snyder has paid kickbacks to Donald Trump. It's already been made public before. More than likely, those kickbacks are going into a, you know, like, well, when it's time to give us a vote for a stadium, be there for us. You know, Trump can say whatever he wants to. I'm not saying that he's wrong or right. I'm actually glad that it's happening. I don't know if it'll get approved. We'll see. I think in the end, they give us the chance to move back to D.C. and Snyder has to pay for it. Hopefully, when he pays for it, he gives us this beautiful stadium and he doesn't make it any more than 65,000 people considering it, because I'm tired of opposing fans taking our stadiums over. It's ridiculous, and it's because here we are sitting with a mediocre team and a 91,000 capacity football stadium. That's a stadium that's built for a top football team. We already had to downgrade it, rip a whole bunch of seats out. I believe now it's down to like 81,000, I think. You know, that's a big drop. You go from 91,000 to 81,000. I remember when they were adding seats to try to make it bigger. First time I went, the place almost made my ears bleed, you know. The last time I went, the place was barely even filled. So there you have Redskins prez Bruce Allen on Alex Smith keeping his fingers crossed. See? Tell me this guy does not look like a politician. I mean, that's all he is, and that's all he's ever been. And what he's saying about Alex Smith, who knows? He might be right. At this point right now, it comes off as sounding like bullshit, but, you know, whatever. The Kyler Murray thing, I think that's TMZ trying to make a, you know, a push on. But the reason why I pushed this out here and let everybody see this, you can see that he is definitely somewhere in D.C., probably a court building somewhere. And TMZ is right there to ask him questions. They don't really, do they say in the article where he was at? 34 year old, no, they don't say in the article where he was at. It just says he was on Capitol Hill. Just makes me think he was there doing something with the stadium deal. Why else would he be up there on Capitol Hill? I mean, he's a Redskin executive, you know. But the whole thing is that I don't believe Bruce Allen is needed for this process. They already have the Redskins. I forgot what it's called, the name coalition with Chad Peterson and the other guys. They can push this bill through. They don't need Bruce Allen. Okay, so I'm a little confused. And all he is the Redskins executive anyway. I mean, he's an empty suit, technically. He's there for his name. He's there for his title, money. Technically, that's really all that there is about with this guy is name, know-how, and money. And when it comes to know-how, it just means he knows his brother, who in fact knows another person, who in fact knows another person, who in fact could get them a stadium deal, or at least the votes they're looking for a stadium deal that the president already can't give or whatever. All the president could do is sign something in. He can't get the votes on the floor unless the people on the floor are willing to give him the votes. Now, people that Bruce Allen's people, I mean, his brother was governor of Virginia and a senator, so he knows people. So Bruce Allen's people could perhaps maybe push to get some votes. It's very possible. I'm not saying it's not something that's, you know, some sort of illegal act or something, but the whole point I was trying to make is that this is where he's at and what he's doing. He was on Capitol Hill this past week, and he says he's keeping his fingers crossed about Alex Smith. He should just learn how to say no comment, but it is what it is. At least he's actually speaking to the media, I guess. I cannot believe that the Redskins continue to employ this guy, but we're going to go ahead and move on. Looking at the next thing I want to speak on, It's a topic that I probably will revisit in more of a centered video on just this topic alone. But the top 5 players the Redskins must re-sign this offseason stick out like a sore thumb. And I'm going to be honest with you. The 6th one is there, but he would have to take less money to be able to be in this discussion at all. And at this point, I wouldn't want him to because I feel like he can make better money elsewhere. All right, number 1, without even a doubt, Adrian Peterson. He has got to be re-signed. And the reason I say that is he will make the transition for Derrius Guice so much easier, and he can be a workhorse whenever Guice needs a breather, whatever the case may be. I mean, it's a good collection of backs. You know, I don't know what they're going to do with the other guys. I figure they're probably going to keep 1 or 2 guys to bring into camp. But these 2 guys together could be the next, big backfield, man. I mean, you got one guy that could keep AP healthy, and you got another guy that can keep your young guy where you want him to be. Keep Guice on the healthy swing. Because essentially what the Redskins want to do is kind of let Peterson be the workhorse at first and bring back Guice slowly to make sure he's good on that injury, don't get re-injured real quick. And then, before you know it, by mid-season to mid to late season, Guice is going to be that guy with the main amount of carries because AP's older. Give him a breather every now and again. You'll want to make things right with him, make sure that he's not getting too overworked. Perhaps he might get an injury. If you've got somebody like Guice there, you could just lower AP's carries. And then you also got Chris Thompson has changed your pace. I mean, to me, it could be the best 3-headed monster in the business. Now, one way to ensure that the running game is going to do nothing but get better would be to secure the linemen we know work for this team. Ty Nsekhe is the number 2 man on the list. He has to be re-signed. Now, the interesting part about this particular player is we've managed, well, I say we, but the front office has managed to be able to re-sign him to 2 restricted deals. And now he gets on his first unrestricted deal, and we're going to see exactly where his mind's at, if he wants to stay a Redskin or if he wants to test the market. At 34 years old, I'm thinking he's probably going to stay home and just give us a discount at this point. But we have to make an offer to this guy. He is essentially our backup Trent, if you know what I mean. This guy can do it, man. I mean, he's a monster, and at the same time, he could deal with a lot of pain and a lot of injury. He keeps going, man. I noticed this guy he's dealt with a lot of knee issues, but he plays through it. The next guy on the list is another lineman, and it's a guy that maybe falls under the radar for a lot of people. But number 3, Jonathan Cooper. Last year, when he came onto the roster, I realized he didn't play, but maybe it was 4 games, maybe 3 games. He plugged right in. Problem is everywhere this guy goes, he just gets hurt. I think that I heard a couple people say he did the same thing in Dallas, and then he just got hurt. But I figure you get a journeyman's contract out of him, 1-year league minimum on him, and I think that he's really good for depth. I mean, I realize that as a team, we still want to make a move towards a younger guy. And we also already have Ari Kunjo, who, is coming up this year. I believe his contract is coming up this year. You know what? I remember now. We cut him actually year before last, but we brought him back last year, and we got him signed to a futures contract. I'm almost certain he signed for 2 years. But he'll be coming up on his deal next year, I believe. So we still have Kunjo. We had him on IR this season. So Cooper, Kunjo gets hurt a lot too, though, it seems like. Seems like that was the deal with him in college too. But Cooper is a guy that I think we need to bring back for depth. If nothing else, to be a backup. This guy can play in the system. We've seen him do it. I think it's because he's played with Callahan before. So, we'll see what they do with it. But to me, number 3 is Jonathan Cooper. He really looked like he fit the role. I wish he wouldn't have got hurt last year because, you know, we might have actually done a little better. Number 4 on this list, and I'm going to have to tell you that it's probably number 4 because of lack of other people that are going free agent, that I actually put this guy on this list, even though I personally, this guy is one of my favorites. Number 4, Jamison Crowder. See, here's the thing. The top 3 for me are do or dies. Jamison, to me, looking at what his value is, it's somewhere around 8.5 or 8.3 million a year, and I'm just not convinced that the Redskins can afford that and do what they need to do elsewhere. But at the same time, it's like, what do you do? Because then we have no receivers except for Doxson, and who has any faith in Josh Doxson at this point? Can I see a show of hands? Anybody? Because, you know, I can make an argument to tell you that, hey, well, you know, there was tons of tape that showed last year that Alex Smith was not comfortable throwing him the ball, or that there was tons of tape showing where he was open and didn't get the ball thrown to him, or whatever the case may be. Some of these quarterbacks are shell-shocked and scared to throw him the ball now. Alex Smith wasn't in tune yet. Right as he was starting to get in tune, he got hurt last year. The question you have to ask yourself is if we don't bring Jamison Crowder back, who catches passes for the Redskins? I'm just wondering. I mean, do you go into a year with Jordan Reed as your number 1 option and your number 2 option being Josh Doxson? I mean, I realize that we can draft a couple of guys as well. No guarantee those guys are going to cross over either. Now, as far as that draft conversation goes, that's a conversation for another day, because I have seen some guys that I am really impressed with when it comes to coming out of college this year. At any rate, Jamison Crowder, number 4, and to be quite honest with you, if we were in a year where we had plenty of cap room, I would want to sign Jamison Crowder. But in a year, so it's an iffy call, you know. In a year where we're up against the wall with a situation going on with Alex, to take an $8 million cap hit for Jamison Crowder would be kind of hard. Maybe if they structured it to where it was like a 3-year deal and it was back-ended. And even if it was a 4-year deal, if it was still back-ended, not a lot of upfront money against the cap, maybe we can go ahead and keep Jamison. And that brings me to number 5, which I think a lot of people were kind of like in the middle and on the border on. But Clinton Dix, the number 5 player that we should bring back. Now, when I say number 5 player, obviously I mean a free agent player who his contract's up. But at any rate, has to come to the table and meet us midway for this to work. Otherwise, a lot like what I was saying with Jamison Crowder, we really can't afford any kind of deal with this guy because he's going to want probably the $9 to $11 million a year range, and that's just completely out of bounds for what we need. But at the same time, if we could lock him into some sort of deal, maybe get a 1-year prove it out of him, it would make our draft situation a lot easier to deal with. Now, it's very important for me to point out that if either of those two guys should walk in free agency, we'll get some compensation out of it with picks next year, just like we've got this year with guys that walked last year. So you can't really look at it and say, oh, they're walking and we're not getting nothing. Now, the guy that's on the outside looking in is Preston Smith. And easily in another year where we had money and we didn't have so many needs, perhaps we didn't have a hurt quarterback that we had so many question marks that surrounded us, we'd be looking to sign Preston Smith. But from what all I could tell, everything that I've heard, the contract situations haven't really gone that far with Preston Smith and the Redskins. So he's going to be given the option to walk out on the free agent market. And I think he's going to find a market that's going to overpay him. And that's because that's the way the market is. They're going to look at what he could do. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a time for everybody to pay attention and see a player who is a step away. This guy's always a step away. A guy that's a step away in the NFL is about to become a big-time millionaire. Watch as this guy gets paid. Unless by some strike of luck by the Redskins, he says that he wants to stay a Redskin and gives them some hometown discount, which why would he? I mean, let's just be honest. Why would he? Now, there's been multiple reports about AP and the talks going on with him. You know, I also heard in the last couple of weeks about Brandon Sheriff and talks going on with him as well. In my opinion, the talks with Brandon Sheriff are ultra important. They need to rework his deal. They cannot go into this year looking at $13 or $14 million for 1 year for Sheriff, while the rest of the team is really kind of hit hard about how they pay everybody. You know, a reworked contract could perhaps save anywhere from $5 to $8 million in cap space if they rework it well enough, maybe give him a good enough bonus. Who knows what they can do? Who knows what he's willing to do? They need to find out. Cannot let this guy go into his last year on his deal going into the next year. You cannot do it. People should be fired for lesser things, if you understand what I mean. We gave a top 10 pick for this guy. It was way too high for a guard, but we did it because this guy's a monster. We cannot allow him to walk in free agency. It can't happen. One thought about Preston Smith before I move on. If you really want to really rehash the argument inside your brain, go look at the stats between Preston Smith and Ryan Kerrigan. And remember that the contract that Ryan Kerrigan has, he makes less than what Preston Smith will sign for when once free agency opens up, or if Preston Smith were to be offered a contract with us. He would be making more than Kerrigan at that point. And Kerrigan has been a consistent sack guy, you know, strip guy, consistent Redskin. He's played every game. I'm not saying that Preston Smith does not have a really good career ahead of him, that, you know, some things he does well that Ryan Kerrigan isn't really all that great at yet, but Preston Smith is about to get paid. You know, I wanted to touch on one particular topic that, you know, I've seen across a few groups, and I've seen it quite a few times posted on my videos or maybe on posts on Facebook. But a lot of people tend to try to string the Redskins with every free agent quarterback that there is. And I continue to try to tell most level-headed Redskin fans to take a step back and understand that we do not have the money to chase a 15 to 25 million a year quarterback in the free agent market or trade for one. We just don't have it. So everybody kept telling me, oh, we can just go get Flacco. What are you talking about? Go get Flacco. He's won a ring, blah, blah, blah. And I always tell them, no, can't do that because look at his contract. Flacco's contract's too big. People, let's go get Nick Foles. There's a certain thing there you have to understand with the Nick Foles deal that would make it even harder to happen because it's the Philadelphia Eagles. And if anybody knows what's been going on lately, those two front offices are not very friendly. And the same thing when people start talking about that the Eagles should trade him to the Giants. Nope, they're not going to trade him to the Giants. Those two front offices are cold as freaking Alaska, man. It's not happening. But those guys make too much money. I am willing to stand out on the line right now and mark my words, say that the Redskins will not sign any high-priced quarterback this offseason or trade for one. Now, that's not saying that they won't draft a quarterback. What I'm hopeful for is that they don't have to spend draft picks to move up to get their guy. You know, at this point, I could see basically 3 other teams that are in the quarterback market. If you look at the Redskins and say they have to get a quarterback, I could see 3 teams that are ahead of the Redskins still. Denver traded for Flacco this week. That actually helps the Redskins if the Redskins are looking at trying to secure a quarterback. That actually helps them because it means one team is out of the quarterback market now with the Broncos. Now, it also means that the Broncos could get in the market of trying to trade their pick, creating another team trying to move up. So that's a thought to keep in the back of your mind. But, you know, is there going to be a lot of time to talk about the draft coming up? You also have to think that in those 3 teams, somebody is going to pick up Nick Foles as well. I doubt it'll be the Giants. It'll more than likely be Jacksonville, which means that leaves 2 teams ahead of the Redskins picking a quarterback, or in the market at least to pick a quarterback. I think we all know that Dwayne Haskins is trying to push the bill into New York. I think we all know that New York's probably interested. But the thing is, I'm not all that convinced that New York's going to take a quarterback yet. New York might even be, by the time the draft gets here, they might even be smart to move back to, to get a player that they're looking for and be able to get the quarterback they're looking for. Who knows how this all can unfold? Now, in my opinion, it's either between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Dolphins to who gets Nick Foles. But at the same time, whoever's left over, and then the Giants will possibly be looking for a QB. And I don't think the Giants are going to take Drew Lock, which is actually the guy that I like. And then you got the Duke quarterback, Daniel Jones, who a lot of people are kind of cold on, hit or miss. But if the Redskins are going to pick a guy, I'm hoping that it's from that pool. But if they were to take a guy like Kyler Murray, I mean, I really want to see more from this guy from the combine. But if they really were to pick Kyler Murray, I mean, obviously I'd roll with it. I'm not a hater, so it's not going to. I'm not a negative fan for the act of being a negative fan. But if they were to take a Kyler Murray, it wouldn't be my first want. But at the same time, I just do not want them to trade up. That's the whole thing. I do not believe that any of these quarterbacks are worth giving up a pick or two, or whatever the price tag is, to move up from 15 to wherever. I do not think it's worth it. I've seen the ramifications of moving up that far. We did it the last time and it worked. So everybody says, what are you, kind of like scared of the RG3 effect? And I said, well, the RG3 effects actually worked. I mean, if you really take things into account, we traded up, we spent a lot, but he won Rookie of the Year. He took us to the playoffs, and then between either him or the coach or the medical staff, one of the three or all three, ruined his career by keeping him on the field. And then whoever else ruined it from that point on by not, trying to teach him better or whatever the case may be. But the fact is that the actual moving up was a success. And if you look at the players that were traded in the draft picks that all came out, that trade was a wash because none of those players really panned out. I'd say that Ogletree might have been the best player. Was it Ogletree? And he's not even with the Rams anymore. So, I continue to be completely enamored by looking at tape from Marquise Brown, from Hollywood Brown. And DK Metcalf has just grabbed my attention at this point. With his size and stature of that guy is immense. And I want to see how fast he is. We might have a Megatron Part 2 situation on our hands, which if that be the case, I doubt he slipped to the 15th. But Metcalf, DK Metcalf, good Lord. But I have a short list. Cody Ford's on that too, by the way. Deontay Thompson, DeAndre Baker, Daniel Jones. Kyler Murray is right there on the outside of my short list. And I've been hearing a lot of people on Twitter, Redskin Twitter, really going nuts over the Iowa tight end. TJ Hawkinson, I believe is his name. I looked at him. He seems like he's, kind of a jack of all trades. He can block. He can catch. He can do a lot of things that we need. I'm just not certain that a tight end should be picked at 15 with all the talent that's in the front end of this draft where the Redskins pick. We'll see more when the combine happens, but, that's kind of where I stand with it right now. I kind of have a little short list that I'm paying attention to for the top section of the draft. And there's a couple other guys on there, too, that are edge rushers that I didn't mention. I really believe that, some of these quarterbacks signing could really help us if we're looking in that direction. And you have to believe that they are. I mean, they're looking at Colt McCoy as the most viable piece that they have, and then Josh Johnson. And I'm not trying to take nothing away from Josh Johnson, but there's a reason why he's been on several teams. He hasn't been given that much of a chance, and two, he is not anything more or thought of anything more than a backup. We're going to see how that progresses forward. I do believe he'll be brought back into camp. I do not know what the team is looking into doing. I know that Jay Gruden is heading into what we would all deem a year that is not a favorable one for him. I mean, he has a lot of things coming to a head, and this is really the make or break year. He's starting to look like a lame duck coach. And if he's entering as a lame duck coach, do you really, as fans, want to see the organization take a quarterback with this guy in a lame duck year? One, that kills 1 year of the rookie deal that you get by drafting a quarterback or rookie quarterback. Two, then we got to deal with having to switch offenses to whatever other coach comes behind, unless they just immediately flip into another coach who has the exact same offense, which probably won't happen. And then three, you have to deal with the fact that the team will be going through a change in flux as far as talent and everything else. It'll be another 2 years. It'll set the team back if they change coaches. Gruden is not going to sit idle and want to start Colt McCoy and Josh Johnson knowing everything that I just said. Gruden is going to want to win. He's going to want to get a new contract. Who wouldn't, right? So he's going to be looking for that guy that creates the spark, that gets the W's. That's why it worries me he's going to reach with the quarterback. I realize that there's all these other people in the room and that, you know, this picture that's been painted for us and everything, but I just don't like that thought that he's in the room, he's going to help make this pick, and in his mind, he's thinking, I'm going into a lame duck year, and I'm desperate. But it is what it is. I touched on a little bit about how bad the depth at guard was for the Redskins last year, or how bad it is going into the 2019 season. And, you know, recently there was kind of a thought when Spencer Long got released by the New York Jets, there was kind of a thought that maybe the Redskins might try to re-sign him, bring him back at a much, you know, cheapened contract. You know, I think he signed like, was it like a $22 million deal or $23 million deal with the Jets? And it was like $6 million a year or something of that nature. And I was thinking maybe since he got his payday, the Redskins might bring him back. Well, the Bills actually signed him. So that means there'll be no reunion. That actually might be a good thing, though, because I thought it was better to move on. I thought Spencer was a better guard than center. That's why it was kind of surprising to see New York pick him up and use him as a center. But it leads me back to another story that I saw this week with Tyler Catalina, I believe was his name, is on his way back from injury. I think he hurt his shoulder last year. And he's trying to say that he's like 5 times stronger than he was before last season. And I was talking a little bit earlier about Cuonjo and Jonathan Cooper and being decent depth. Catalina could be another depth guy that we could put in there. You know, last year I pointed it out over and over again how we were like 5th or 6th string guards and they were getting hurt and bringing them off, you know, the unemployment line and putting them on the field and they get hurt 2 days later. That's what was going on with us. So having a guy like Catalina coming in and being able to be some more depth behind Cuonjo and Cooper, it only can help in my opinion. But the team needs, and I'm going to stick to my guns on this, the team needs to draft some more guards. Now, I'm going to say 2 guards at this point. One near the beginning of the draft and one near the end. Obviously, the one near the end you'd be taking now for depth. The one at the beginning of the draft, though, is somebody that I think should push for a starter position. And the more I look at it, Cody Ford from OU is a guy, I believe he played tackle in college. And I'm pretty certain everybody's talking about shoving him inside and playing guard in the NFL. That is somebody that I would like for the Redskins to look at. Now, if somehow or another the team could move back and take Cody Ford, that to me that would be the perfect move. If somehow or another we could take the 15th pick and move back to like the 22nd pick and pick up a second round pick and maybe end up taking Hollywood Brown with that pick, that would be like the perfect string of events. But something also tells me that after the combine that Hollywood Brown is going to shoot up the charts. And I also believe that Kyler Murray is going to shoot up into the top 10 once the combine happens. Now, what'll be interesting is to see what team perhaps moves up to take Kyler Murray in the top 10, because there's people are going to sit back and look at the Redskins and think it's going to be the Redskins. All the way to the end, I'm hoping that we don't move up, but I won't be completely mad if we were to take Murray. I like him better than some quarterbacks that I've seen them in the past kind of put on our plate, so to speak. I personally still like the idea of taking somebody in the third or lower rounds, quarterback, and try to bring him in, to a system, teach him a few things, get a couple years of that rookie deal. I just don't think there's a quarterback in this draft worth moving up for. Last thing I want to touch on, this week I kind of ran across an article that was talking about how the Lions were trying to deflect their way off of Hard Knocks by saying something about how John Gruden and the Raiders would be what people would rather see than to see Detroit and see what was going on there with Matt Patricia. But it brought me to more of a thought in my brain of, I'm going to look at this because everybody's been talking about this. So I thought to myself, okay, well, let's take a better look at it. I remember hearing before what the things, the exemptions a team had to fill or whatever, and I'd always been thankful that the Redskins hadn't been chosen to do this. But come to find out, this year there are 5 teams that cannot say no to Hard Knocks in 2019. And it's the Lions, the Raiders, the 49ers, the Giants, and the Redskins. Now, I think we all know that if the Redskins take Kyler Murray, that will probably be the team they pick. But one has to think that the Raiders would be a little bit more to look at and a little bit more going on. And that the Giants would be ahead of us as well with, Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley. But I know their front office does not want them to be on it either. So it probably comes down between Oakland and the 49ers, in my opinion. Unless they just decide to pick the Redskins, which, what a train wreck that could be. Now, also, it could be a chance for the Redskins to actually prove to the outside world that they're not a train wreck as well. They could mix it up by just jumping all over it and being like, you know what, we'll go. Wouldn't that be crazy? Now, I know Redskin fans are going to sit back and say, absolutely nobody wants to put us on that show and watch it as far as being a Redskin fan. And I agree. I watch each year, and it's always kind of fun to watch other teams involved. It would be cringeworthy. Whew. Because the rest of the world would see how backwards our front offices run. But as I said a second ago, finally we'd be able to actually see if what the media has been broadcasting forever has any validity to it. Because you would be able to see players get frustrated with management if it's going on. If they're sitting right there in camp, you'll be able to see it. And I know that no team wants anything to do with this. And I'm pretty sure in this article it said something about that, about how nobody wants to do it except maybe Oakland. And I heard that there was a response to this whole situation. Like John Gruden said, laugh out loud or something to that nature. But I know that I have been dreading the thought of this because I thought that it might happen last year. And then I thought that it might happen the year before that. You know what I mean? So it's like they've never chosen the Redskins before. And odd thing was, when they first started doing Hard Knocks, I always thought, why not put the Redskins on? But I've watched them over the last, 10 years, 6 years, 7 years. I've watched it now, and I do not want my team on that. It's bad exposure. No, thank you. We already have enough, and yeah. But I'll say it again for the third time. It would give us a chance to be able to see behind the Iron Curtain. That's really all I got this week, man. Obviously, we're in that little bit of a stall line between the draft and the end of the year, and nothing really going on. But I've really been thinking about lately the direction of the channel, and I see it's growing. There's no way to stop it either. It's a gradual thing, and it has leaps and bounds where it jumps. As far as growth goes, I've noticed a big jump at times, and then kind of a gradual, movement at other times. But onward and upward, the channel is getting bigger and better. In my opinion, when I start doing the live shows, things will probably jump a little bit more. The needle will probably move a little bit more. I kind of feel like I'm doing an old school way of things with doing the videos, but this is kind of what I'm used to at this point, and I don't really have the time to do the live shows at this juncture. But it's coming real soon, and I mean probably before this month is over with, and definitely before next month begins. I actually was thinking about maybe even doing a couple of live streams, maybe like Saturday night, late nights live streams, maybe even do some live streams during the AAF games. But I haven't had the time to be able to do it yet. When it does happen, it'll be a spur of the moment kind of thing where I just jump on and immediately do it. And I'll try to schedule it on the thing here on YouTube. I know YouTube has a little thing to schedule to show everybody what kind of upcoming content that I may have ahead of myself, but I don't really use that any. Actually, I've never used it. And it's been a while since I went live, and I get a lot of people. I was asked today when I was going to do the live show, and I don't have an answer to that yet, but I promise that answer is coming soon, and it may come as a impromptu, oh man, he's live, but I will try to schedule it ahead of time. And that's about all I got, man. Y'all take it easy. Hail to the Redskins. Peace.